Forward to it.
Any other questions? Go to principal evaluation update.
Mr. President and members of the board, last time I briefed on the principal evaluation system, so this is just an update, and really I just wanted to show the board some of the feedback we received from the principals. We were asked last time to ask the principals. We had done considerable work, you will remember, with the principal focus group, 25 principals, and had gotten great feedback from them and their support for the principal evaluation system, new principal evaluation system. But we've also, as a result of the request last time, polled the principals, and here are some of the numbers for you, and let me try to make sense of some of this data here. And we did this only yesterday. There was a very short time fuse right before winter break, and then the principals they weren't meeting until after the break. So that's our first opportunity to ask all of the principals. And so you see the numbers there. I think it's very similar to what Mr. Tyson said, who presented to us from Whitney Young Elementary. Whenever you have a new process, there's going to be some anxiety and some trepidation. I was impressed that we have more principals agree and strongly agree with the evaluation system as presented as disagreed, and then we had a lot who are neutral, and I think that reflects again some of the anxiety. And so there certainly has to be more sense making, and as we go through the years, principals will become more and more comfortable with it. I added the other information there. We also asked the principals of that because I think it's important to note, especially in that last question, that principals do feel that they're getting support. This is a huge change. There's no question, and there's more and more accountability. We had just finished. Well, by the end of this week, we will have finished 223 mid-year reviews. These are comprehensive reviews for principals around their work: curriculum alignment, instructional feedback, action planning, climate and culture, and to provide the coaching and training, professional development is a huge process that our principals have received. So I think it's important to note that the principals feel pretty good about the support they need to professionally develop, and as we move forward on the principal eval, if the board approves it, I think they're going to find that support continuing, even to a greater degree. And Mr. President, I would ask that the principal evaluation system be placed as a consent agenda item on January 25th board meeting and be pulled for vote at that time.
Some questions.
How many principals do we have total?
223.
Okay.
Some questions.
That?
On page 6,
The new handout.
the new handout. Well, the handout that was online.
That was on here.
That was sent to us. Actual evaluation. The measuring principle. If there's concept based, received in our.
Hold up a second.
That we got a while back.
Hold up a second. Have we done this? Let's finish the presentation.
Oh, I thought it was through the presentation.
I'm done, sir.
Oh.
The document was presented last time.
Okay.
Page 6 of the principal effectiveness, we have school star results, 5 points, and district common assessments, 10 points. Why is the star result less than the district common assessments?
On page, on my 5, we actually talked about that at both the principal focus group and with the principal, with some of the principals yesterday, and that's a choice made by the principal focus group, but they're at liberty to change that.
I just think school star tests is the way the test, the state mandated test, is what we're going to be judged by. And this district common assessment is just a benchmark to kind of help us know where our students are. So I just think it should be 10 and 5.
I think that there are multiple measures, as you can see here, and we don't want any one, the principals don't want any one to really be the measurement for them. But I'm okay with leaving that decision to the principals if they think it should be 10 or 5 or 8 and 8 or 8 and 7, 7 and 8.
I guess I was trying to figure out, it's a scale from 1 to 5, if I'm correct. And so since we don't know the data for the STAR test yet, how are we going to, what are the point scoring? Because when we look at what we did for your event, how are the point scoring going to be? It's going to be the same?
It's very similar to that. Some of these metrics, especially on the STAR, we will have to wait until we get the data from the state before we can say how many points a principal gets.
So this won't technically go into next January?
I mean, because the stuff that we get this month from the state is for last year, so we'll have the ability to set benchmarks there.
This from last year, because they took the STAR test last year.
And we can get preliminary data fairly.
But we won't get it until September.
I think the preliminary data they get.
Got it. And Cecilia, do you know, when did we get this?
June, this is something. And so the other, then I'm trying to understand the feeder group STAR results. What is the idea for the feeder group STAR results? I mean, how is it school A at an elementary level responsible for the high school level? And how my evaluation going to be based on that feeder group?
That's a good question, and it's also something we talked about with the principal focus group. The concept is we're trying to get people to identify with the feeder pattern, and trying to have principals thinking not just about their school, but thinking about the feeder pattern, so that we all have to collaborate in order to move that feeder pattern forward. And it's a small attempt to make sure that we start to identify with the feeder pattern and make sure that we recognize the strengths of our elementary, middle, convince the middle schools to come to our feeder pattern so we don't lose kids. And so if we're all in it together that way, collaborative efforts to make sure kids stay in the feeder pattern.
But you make them stay. I guess I was trying to, like, if the elementary school, if you have, how the elementary principal, what are we going to measure them on? They have meetings, talk, or how are we going to measure the principal on that?
This is just on the STAR results.
So whatever the STAR results for the high school will impact my evaluation at the elementary school?
It's a combination of STAR results for that feeder pattern. Cecilia, can you explain that?
I was just trying to understand the elementary, high school.
I think she's trying to say, as an elementary principal, she doesn't have to do the high school or the middle school if it's just the scores. I think what you're trying to say is that you're trying to encourage them to meet together and talk together and work together.
Right, and
this is the STAR results.
Right.
Yes, so I don't know how would that meet together, talk together to make sure. High school STAR test, if the kids don't pass the EOC, the elementary school, on my evaluation, I'm going to get either 5 points, 4 points, 3 points, or 2 points. I don't see how that connects on my evaluation as an elementary school principal.
It's you may not have direct control over the results of another school. That's true, but you do have some influence over whether kids stay in the feeder pattern, whether parents are engaged in the feeder pattern, whether siblings work well in the feeder pattern, and the whole notion of feeder pattern, you have some skin in the game, so that your kid in elementary school has to have a good high school to go to, and it really is just we're all in this together, and it's 5 points.
How does that work with magnet schools? Like, for instance, I have 2 daughters. I have maybe one at magnet and one at a comprehensive school. I wouldn't have a sibling, staying in that feeder pattern. This feeder group STAR results, I just don't see how that's fair for a principal at elementary. I understand the collaboration, the talking, making sure we stay together and we're all in this together, but I don't see how it impacts me on my achievement for the STAR results.
There's some, it's fairly abstract, but there's some comparison to, I can see this in private industry, because there's a lot of companies that will do, part of your compensation is tied to the corporate profits, and that's for basically everybody in the company. So even though you might work in this one little component, the thing that matters the most is the total amount of money that the company has on the bottom line. So this is at least similar in thinking to that concept, because the thing that matters most, from the bottom line at this point is, instead of profit, it's the achievement scores of the students.
Our students,
I can see
I'm
that.
just saying,
It sends
our
a-
students are not profit. I'm just trying to figure
It sends a collective message
Okay.
that
But how we measure?
that I, as a principal, have to perform for the benefit of colleagues, and that's the
unusual.
message that it's sending. It's whether it's fair or not. I can see your side to that.
I mean,
I can see your side to that, but that's the message.
Because then I need to know exactly what's expected of me when you say feeder group star results, because I can't fire or hire any of the teachers. I may feel the principal at high school is terrible, and I'm good, or the middle school principal's good, but the high school, and then here I am getting, you determine
you're
if I
gonna-
get 5 points, but I can't hire or fire that person
Now you
to
have
replace
some
them.
incentive to try to help that person get better. So it's a small incentive, but there is some systemic incentive to try to help that person get better.
Okay, and the division achievement gap, I'm trying to understand how that is.
It's a similar concept that the achievement gap in middle school is not the achievement gap in middle school. The achievement gap in middle school is the achievement gap that has reasons or causes that start really early on. And the same with high school, same with elementary. And it's a very similar notion that we have a collective role around the achievement gap. No matter which school, no matter which principal, these are all of our kids, and there is some collective impact around that. And so it's a very similar concept that we were just talking about. And again, whether that's directly fair or not, I guess is arguable. Most of the metrics, most of it is around my individual school, and the performance piece is all about my individual school. So I think for any one principal, these metrics talk about their own performance and their school's performance, with some portion, being a collective impact.
The college ready rate, what 8th grade national reading test are we going to take?
Yes, ready,
We're going
step.
to do Ready Step, and then the career ready rate, we're going to judge that on the STAR test? How are we going to do the career ready rate? What test is that?
Career ready rate is being developed with the criteria for what career ready means. So we actually don't have all the criteria for career ready yet, but that's being developed.
So the school STAR results and the district common assessment, you say you're going to go back to see, because I think STAR results should weigh more than the district common assessment benchmark test.
Isn't it because there's two, the mid and the end?
Yeah,
That's why it's 5 points each.
That's, well,
We have
Well,
10.
there's two things here. We could leave it to the principals, the principal focus group. That's my intent. But the second thing is, STAR is also, if you look down at the college, at the fourth grade writing.
What says career ready?
Yeah,
That's another point scale.
What is that, 4th grade writing career, or is it going to be college looking at STAR?
no, I'm sorry. 8th grade math and science. Cecilia, isn't that STAR also?
College ready rate has 8th grade national.
That's advanced level at the, of
that's a
STAR.
STAR level. Is there?
How do you handle algebra? The kids taking algebra instead of traditional math there, just out of curiosity.
That one was the ready step,
Ready Step test.
8th grade.
There's a Ready Step math test.
Yes, math and reading.
Math reading for 8th grade only, right? Because Olivia.
Right.
Thanks, Alex.
So the school, so you're saying college ready rate is 8th grade national reading assessment and 3rd grade reading STAR test.
Yes.
That's the STAR test.
The level 3 advanced.
A level 3 advance is then in the career reading, you're developing that determination. Okay, so the concern is that school STAR results and the district common assessment, because district is what we've changed that, that assessment test. So I think the STAR test should weigh more than the district common assessment test.
I think, and the intent is to let the principals decide. We talk about letting, some input and feedback in the system. This is one area where they can decide. I think, and I think the jury's out. I think yesterday I heard some principals who voiced that concern, but I've also heard the principals on the other side saying it should stay the way it is. But I think if we have a good discussion, very informed, and let the principals decide which one makes the most difference for them in their evaluation. Mind you, we're still going to try to do as well as we can on the STAR, regardless of the point structure right here. This is a question of their preference on the evaluation.
Okay, let me get Nancy and then Dan.
Yeah, on this same page, where it says college ready rate high school, I know we've talked about doing SAT and ACT tests. Are we considering the AccuPlacer anywhere in there for the community college? And the reason I ask that is because so many of our kids, I think, have the potential where they could go to community college, but when they graduate, they end up taking remedial classes, and for them it might be more relevant to have the AccuPlacer and know where they stand. Am I going to have to take remedial classes, or am I ready for college classes, rather than just okay, this is a standard state university or state college. The community college, I think that would be a good indicator for the community college students. I didn't know if that fit in there anywhere.
We actually have some options there, and we can look at AccuPlacer, because I don't think it's in there right now as college ready.
Okay. Dan and then
But we can look at
Eric.
Yeah, I was also uncomfortable with including the feeder pattern group STAR results. It seems to me that if you're a principal in an elementary school, you really don't have any input at all as to what happens in the other 15 elementary schools in your district, much less the middle schools and the high school. And I would think that, and I have the same concern also.
Did you say
15.
15. Oh.
Yeah, I mean, really, what happens in my district at Hexter has no effect on what happens at Truett. They're in different parts of the district, and there's not really any relationship. I would think that if the STAR results are important, you might take those 5 points off the feeder group and put them back on the school. And the same thing would go with respect to the division achievement gap. There's not really any impact or influence that one principal has over the performance of the schools that are otherwise in that in that division. But let me ask you this: if we were uncomfortable with including the feeder group STAR results and the division achievement gap in the mix, where would you move those points? What would you do to make this a better evaluation if we told you we didn't want those two in there?
Yeah, I think I would move the feeder group STAR results to the school STAR results, and that would be 10. That would solve some of the concern. Division achievement gap, I don't know, we might move it either to STAR or the career ready rate, 8th grade math and science or 4th grade writing. But one of the things I hope the principals need to be asked if what makes the most sense for them. I think there is some value in collective work. In other words, you're part of a team. We already have enough silos in individual schools, and we all talk about collaboration. This is one way that kind of encourages collaboration across schools. And also, there's been a lot of talk, and I agree with the talk, that we need to emphasize feeder patterns much more than we have in the past. And so this is an attempt to do that. But in the end, I think what I would ask the board to do is let the principal focus group make a decision around those. If the STAR needs to be up, if they think the feeder group isn't a good concept, let them decide to move those 5 points to the school's STAR results. The strength of the evaluation system is the participation and input from the principals. And we're serious about that. We've had 5 meetings of the principal focus group. They're going to continue to meet on this. So that's what I would ask the board to do.
How many principals are on the principal focus group? 25 from all areas around the city? Low performing, high performing, magnet schools, mixed,
Send us a list of those principals and the schools that they represent.
25.
Well, I just wanted to follow up on that point. I do appreciate the importance of getting the input of the principals, but when the result comes back, if this is what it is, that the feeder pattern star results and the school star results should be weighted equally, it just doesn't come back in a way that's rational to me. And if you had some consideration of feeder pattern star results and 3 times as much consideration of the school building star results, that sounds a little bit more rational. But when you say the feeder pattern results, I think one particular principal has just a very remote impact on what goes on in the other schools in the pattern, whereas they have potentially a lot more impact on what goes on in their building. So I do agree that we need to defer to the input that we're getting, but when the result comes back, and where you have to scratch your head and say, how can that be rational, then you want to send it back for another look.
Eric and then Elizabeth.
Well, you did ask for principal feedback. We have these scores here. Is there a further breakdown of
Right.
what is agreed and what is neutral and what is strongly agreed?
So we can get that by
No,
division.
in terms of
By
in terms
component.
of the by component
Oh,
of
no,
the evaluation.
Not by component.
So, to Dan's point, you could have asked, okay, how many points, or do you agree that 5 points
We did.
on
I
the
mean,
feeder pattern
We did ask
is a good
the
idea?
principal focus group.
Right,
Not-
but not
the whole
over on the
principal.
principals. I'm sorry?
Conversation with all principals yesterday.
But not a,
Did this topic not come up, or did it come up?
Yeah, it did come up.
so you're asking us to approve this in January. Remind me again, do we have a ED and assistant superintendent evaluation system yet?
No. We
Those are,
have
are
the we have the regular we don't have a new performance evaluation
Like
system for each.
those evaluation systems are the 3R evaluation system used
Sorry?
for a majority of our central staff. Not at this time.
Are we tying them to kind of a similar,
The ED and assistant
Evaluation.
sup, we're using what we had last year.
in terms of star results, feeder pattern results, college-ready results?
Yes, Mike and I talked about this earlier, and I didn't share with the entire board, but we were looking at assistant superintendents and what the metrics should be for them, the EDs, very similar. It actually, and principals.
this was in your concept
EDs.
paper on the evaluation.
This is, one of the original ones. And so we are going to move on that, but not right now.
Oh, but that's not subject to board approval.
But if I understand you, we're not changing the assistant sup, the chief's evaluation. We're using what we already have in place.
I'm curious, is your plan to do that by the end of the year? To have a new evaluation system in for the EDs?
For next year.
So can we, so we're not changing the EDs, the assistant sups, or the chief's evaluation?
Well, we're in the process of doing that. We haven't done it yet.
Except for next year, they'll have a new evaluation. So how are we measuring the principals on this information, and it's not going all the way up?
Well,
Because they are only, you're good as the people who lead you. So we're measuring them on this complex evaluation, and we're not, I'm kind of with Eric, it's not aligning.
I hope that to do that, including the superintendent's evaluation eventually to be on a performance measurement versus incentive. But yes, I already have the concept paper outlined for assistant sups and EDs, and their metrics are very similar. So that eventually it will be for the principals, teachers, EDs, and assistants.
Elizabeth?
Couple of points. First, this does not include any changes to any of the financial related considerations in evaluation tied to comp. So this is just sort of this step one, if you will, but eventually those two things will go together?
Yes, I'm hoping to bring that to the board next year.
Next year, okay. And then the feeder pattern issue is interesting because if you look at feeder patterns, or just look at our total population of schools, 160 of our schools, at least this is what Trustee Morath reminds me, are elementary schools. And middle schools, high schools, are very, on a proportional basis, much smaller populations. We lose a lot of students up through the ranks, and also, in general, we have different issues at each of those levels. I know, for W.T. White's sake, that there's a very strong relationship already with the middle schools that feed it, so that's already in place. But I can think about other areas where that's never had the same benefit, where we're still dealing with potentially even a middle school that may be academically unacceptable and a high school that may be good, but you can't get people past the middle. How does that factor in? Because, everybody's starting from a different place. A principal of a school that's performing well is in a very different place than a principal of a school that academically right now they're trying to turn around. So I'm curious kind of how you took that into consideration in the evaluation system, and then touching on the same issue with respect to the feeder pattern responsibility.
So in most of the metrics, there's more than one way of, example, on the STAR, we would not only look at the passing rate, that would be one measurement. We'd also look at CEI and SEI, which is our longitudinal growth measurement. And then we also look at relationship of peer groups. So we divide kids into peer groups. And those three measurements we give the principal, just like we would teachers eventually, the best of those three. And that way a school that has a population of kids that's struggling more than another school would still have a chance for growth and have their metric be based on growth, longitudinal growth, or based on how their kids did relative to their academic peers, or just the pass rate of the STAR exam. And so in that way, we're going to try to help the schools that are in different places academically.
The principals understand how all that factors into the way the scoring is carried out.
I think most of them understand that. I think until we start to run the numbers and show them, I think there'll be some need for more information and more sharing of and sense-making around the data.
I was just going to say that if there's a way to move forward on because this evaluation seems pretty elegant. I mean, there's obviously some questions about particular components, but I'm sure this is not not ever going to be finished, or you're going to kind of tweak this as feedback comes in as evaluations are done. And it strikes me that it's wise to apply a similar system to the ED layer that's above that. That doesn't require board approval, at least not in my understanding. I'd have to have Jack answer that question for me. But Chapter 21 employees are our purview, and the rest are yours. So I would encourage you to move forward with a similar evaluation as quickly as possible. Specifically with the ED layer, I can see where the chiefs it gets a little bit more dicey, but since the EDs are essentially aligned in their operations around these activities this year, it strikes me as entirely reasonable for this evaluation system to be used rather than the 3R system, which is as weak as any non-outcomes focused evaluation system is.
We can do that.
So, okay, Nancy?
Yeah. As I understand it, and I think Mr. Morath has said it, this is a document that it can be fine-tuned and tweaked as we move into it. It's not set in concrete. This is absolutely never going to change. So if you see, hey, we need to make an adjustment. But I do think in the past we have always worked in these silos, and I think we have to ask ourselves, how has this worked for us? Not very well. And so I like the fact that we are going to try something a little bit different, and I particularly like the fact that we have had principal input, and this is what they're ready to meet this challenge. And as far as the vertical alignment, I worked in a school where we did vertical alignment with the elementary and the middle schools. And my particular category was reading, and we worked very closely with the elementary and the middle school when it came to adjusting those programs and working with the students. So it can be done, and it can be done in a very meaningful way. I think this is I think this is something that we need to move ahead with, and let's get started on it.
Let me ask a few questions about collaboration, because if the principals are going to be held accountable for district common assessment and division gaps. Go ahead.
The district common assessment is common assessments for their school, but it's the same assessment given across the district, but it's their own.
It's for their campus.
Yeah,
okay.
It's for campus.
So that helps out a little bit. So for the
Not
feeder,
the district common assessment that comes from downtown,
It is the
It's
district
the
common
district
assessment.
common
that they create and they give to us,
The ACPs.
School scores.
but they create the test.
Right.
The school's not creating the test. We
Right.
create the test, and are they participating in creating the test to make sure it's aligned?
I'm okay as long as these are the common assessments for their campus.
Yeah, ACPs.
Okay, so the 5% or 5 points for the feeder group and the 5 points for the district.
Those are the only two.
Let me ask, how often and how do principals collaborate as a
Sylvia? That's a good question.
Each one of our assistant superintendents has a variation on how they collaborate or how they have their organization feeder patterns meet, but I would say just off the top of my head that they meet at least once a month with each of their feeder patterns, meaning each executive director. In some cases, they may meet twice a month. It just depends on the need and or what is being petitioned from the principals themselves, because remember that also their professional development is being provided based on what they feel they need. So if they say we need to get together as a feeder pattern to discuss X issue, or we see this kind of need, they will get together and they will have the training provided. But I would say just off the top of my head, I would be safe in saying at least monthly with each feeder pattern.
even for
also,
the
sir,
go ahead.
Also, every Friday, EDs hold a data progress monitoring meeting with a third of their principals. So every third Friday, a principal's going to meet with their colleagues, a few others, and they go over data and key actions. And part of the data drill is to collaborate on what to do about it.
I would hope that when the feeder groups get together, they specifically talk about data that's going to impact their
Yes, sir.
evaluation.
Most definitely.
And that when the division gets together, that there's some talk about how to close those gaps. Still have some concerns about how y'all trying to close gaps, but still, we're talking about evaluations now. Colleagues, any other questions?
Just to explain the rationale for using the division achievement gap rather than the campus achievement gap. Because this is going to be hard to move under any circumstance. It's going to be harder to move when you're talking about the entire battleship rather than just your school. So I'm just curious to know what was the thought process there.
Originally, as we had the ED evaluations and assistant superintendent evaluations, we wanted part of the motivation is to all work together on the same data. So if an assistant sup
We
works
can
on
solve that problem even if it were campus achievement gaps, because it's still the same kind
it's
of
still
data.
part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is just a collective impact. It can be taken out.
I mean, I don't mean to take it out. I'm just back to Trustee Mitchgate's point. 10% of their overall evaluation, 25% of the achievement component of their evaluation is a collective evaluation, which I kind of get the theory for. It's we're all in this together and all of our kids count. But when I think of the stuff that the principals have direct control over, that strikes me as an unusually high component of their evaluation. But assuming that the principal focus group is completely supportive of this, then I'm completely supportive of it.
There's one other rationale, and again, that we can make some changes. But right now, there's some schools. If you're principal, you're looking at the achievement gap, you start at a pretty high place, and in other schools, you have to start at a pretty low place, and it varies depending on school. we can talk about percentages of closure.
Yeah, that got back to a question I think Trustee Jones asked, which was when you look at school star results, I assume these are targets based upon benchmarks of where they were in the prior year. So there's some component of this that is growth oriented. So that's going to have to be a highly sophisticated metric there. So if you're talking about the achievement gap metric, it gets pretty sophisticated pretty quickly. So I think I can understand why you would do it sort of division-wide rather than by campus-wide. It's just, again, when I think about the weighting, 25% of the achievement scores is something they don't have direct control over. So that strikes me as a bit high.
I know if we're going to be able to tweak this, I mean, I don't want to just pass up the opportunity to tweak it when I really don't think it makes sense. I mean, I would suggest maybe we go 8 to, when you look at the star results, put 8 for the school and 2 for the feeder pattern to take into account what you're talking about, trying to build loyalty to the feeder pattern and accountability to the feeder pattern. But I just don't see how it makes sense for you to expect a building principal to have as much impact on the star results at his campus as he would in the entire feeder pattern.
I would go one step further and say, like, when I look at the feeder group star results, maybe out of a point of 3 instead of 5, and then division achievement gap 3 instead of 5, and then increase school star results by the
Division
delta.
achievement gap, you did campus achievement gap.
Well, that would also solve my concern.
Campus achievement gap, as you
If you did
said.
that, then I wouldn't need to change the point value at all.
You said district common assessment.
Well, district common assessment is the school score, so that's already fine.
In order to kind of move forward, if we move the division achievement gap, just took that out and put those 5 points on the school star results,
Make it 10.
that help?
I kind of like that.
I think it should be for the school, or at the very least, school, and if you have to do it by group, then feeder group.
So you're saying campus achievement gap?
Do a, say you're taking notes,
I got campus achievement gap.
campus achievement gap, and
If you do that, then I'm satisfied.
Well, the school star results should be, I think it should weigh more than a district common assessment. Common assessment is just benchmark. The school star results is
I
going to
thought that's the one where they
talk.
the principals talk, and the majority of the principals are the principals in the focus group.
They had both ways.
could
So it's kind of split.
we leave that to the principals, or
Yeah, leave it to the principals.
Let
Are you going to ask all the principals or just the focus group principals?
the focus groups are getting information from their colleagues?
So you're saying school star results, we're going to see if,
Yeah, and the district common assessment, there's 15 points. Let's see how the principals want to divide it.
we need
May
2
choose
for
to divide
feeder
it up.
group?
And then we'll move forward with this month then.
And the division achievement gap is campus achievement gap.
But feeder group star results, 2.
They're talking about repointing that based upon the survey that they're going to run.
10 and 5. They're not taking out district common. Okay.
District common assessments is
We'll get a
campus score on
Yeah, it's
district
not a
common.
district score, it's a campus score.
Yeah, but the common
Talking about the nature of the, I got you.
star is the test, I'm saying that.
So
It is.
I prefer to use.
So we're going to ask the
You get
principals,
2 shakes.
We do common assessment.
Hold up.
we're going to ask the principals about the district common assessments, which is 10 right now. Stars 5, we're going to ask them how to split those points up.
Okay.
So between now and when this comes to our vote in 2 weeks, these changes are going to be made?
Yes.
Okay.
Separate vote.
Okay. Colleagues, in light of the time, are there any burning board